Welcome, Gunrunner.
In 1981, Hong Kong-based electronic game and toy manufacturing giants VTech attempted to join the rising home video game market by engineering an original system capable of competing against the popular Atari 2600 VCS and Mattel Intellivision. Using a 2MHz 6502 CPU, the same video chip as the MSX, and a sound chip that was later seen in the Sega Master System, it had impressive specs for the time. In fact, aside from the CPU itself, it was remarkably similar to the rival ColecoVision that came out around the same time. So much so in fact that VTech later released a converter to play Coleco games on their console. If you want to know more about that story, I've done another video on the subject, so just follow the link in the description or the top right hand corner of the screen. Although the CreatiVision was released worldwide, the system only really achieved success in Australia and New Zealand, where it was renamed the Dick Smith Wizard and sold exclusively by the famous electronics chain, and a little less so in Italy, where it was marketed by well-known washing machine manufacturer Zanussi. Later, a computer version of the machine was also released, called the VTech Laser 2001, as well as a kit to turn your CreatiVision into a fully fledged home computer. It was finally discontinued in 1986 with a tiny library of just 17 games, although there have been some great homebrews released in more recent years to add to this. Despite this meagre selection of cartridges, there are more than enough to make a video like this worthwhile, and indeed interesting, especially when you consider how obscure and unknown the VTech CreatiVision remains. This is mainly due to all the CreatiVision games being developed by VTech themselves, and remaining exclusive to the system, even if many of them aren't entirely original, as you're about to find out. Hopefully this video will encourage some of you to go out and try it via emulation, or even track down the real hardware and add it to your own collection. So let's have a look at those games, shall we?
Looking for a TV game? These games are good, but we don't think they're as good as the Dick Smith Wizard.
Wow, look at the fantastic picture.
With a picture made of 49,000 dots, thousands and thousands more than the other game.
The Wizard tennis game is the greatest.
The Wizard has real space-age controllers, not just simple sticks, and special game overlays that show you how to play.
Unreal. Auto chase and air sea attack.
Sonic Invader, Tank Attack and Planet Defender.
The most brilliant feature, a cartridge converting your Wizard to a personal computer with the same microprocessor as the Apple computer. And the cost of the Wizard only $295. That's 200 under comparable units.
The Dick Smith Wizard.
Exclusive to Dick Smith Electronics.
One of the first things you'll notice about the CreatiVision when you peruse its limited catalogue of games is that the vast majority of them are clones of popular early 80s arcade games. Some of them are even downright rip-offs that led to lawsuits from the corn-nut manufacturers themselves, like the case of Crazy Pucker for example. One of the most popular arcade games of 1982 was Data East's brilliant Burger Time, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Now, as you've probably worked out already, Locomotion is a clone of that very game, but to be fair, one that makes enough changes to get away with it, despite the core gameplay remaining exactly the same. Instead of being set in a burger bar, Locomotion is located, as you may have guessed, down in a railway yard. Your job as the lone engineer is to rebuild a steam engine, complete with carriages and cargo. This is done in exactly the same way as Burger Time. You climb the platforms to walk over the various parts and watch them drop to form the engine below. Just like the Data East game, there are also enemies out to stop you too. And in another carbon copy, the pepper has been replaced with oil. But rather than just stunning the bad guys, in Locomotion, spraying oil at them actually kills them, although only temporarily, as they soon respawn on another part of the screen. This is definitely my favourite CreatiVision game. Also known as Crazy Chicken in some markets, this title has an extremely interesting story behind it. Originally released as Crazy Pucker, yes really, in 1982, the game was nothing more than a straight copy of Namco's hugely popular arcade game Pac-Man. Having already sued several other people for ripping off their game, Namco and Atari, who owned the home rights at the time, didn't hesitate to jump on VTech 2, causing the Hong Kong-based company to withdraw the game from sale and rejig it slightly. The result was this game, Crazy Chicky, which can best be described as Pac-Man in reverse. The pizza-shaped hero has been replaced with a chicken, the ghosts with foxes, and the power pills with carrots. Yeah, I don't really understand that choice of object either. Instead of munching the dots, the idea is now to put them back, like you're planting seeds, with the foxes trying to stop you. Grabbing one of those aforementioned carrots turns the tables on the bushy-tailed foes and allows you to peck them into oblivion, in just the same way as Pac-Man, funnily enough. The gameplay change is an interesting one, certainly not one that I've encountered before, and adds a nice twist to a well-trodden formula. Crazy Chicky is a great looking arcade style game for the VTech CreatiVision, but is only let down slightly by the weedy sound effects. First released in arcades in 1982, Konami's Locomotive was one of the very first examples of an arcade puzzle game. The only official ports of this hugely addictive puzzler were for the MSX, Mattel Intellivision and obscure Tomy Tutor, so discovering Mouse Puzzle was a welcome surprise. The basic idea is to slide around the different squares that make up the playfield so they match up with each other. This works a lot like one of those sliding puzzle games you played as a kid, where you had to keep shifting the plastic pieces around to make up the picture. Like that game, there is just one empty square, so moving around the pieces and getting them in the right places is far from easy. In Mouse Puzzle, as in Locomotion, each square has a piece of track, or pipe in this case, and you're trying to fit these together to form a continuous path. Around the edge of the screen are several other fixed pieces that are there to help you get this right too. The idea is to get the mouse to all the pieces of food and not get caught by the cat. Both animals will keep moving until they hit a dead end, at which point they turn around and go the other way. So you need to try and keep that pesky cat trapped in his own section. The colourful graphics are really attractive here, and the whimsical music suits the game perfectly. If you enjoyed Locomotion, then you're going to love Mouse Puzzle too. Most of the people reading this should remember Sega's excellent Pengo, a cute block-pushing arcade game that was one of the first big hits for the Japanese giant. Well, as you probably guessed already, Stone Age's VTech's take on that very same game, and also the very last commercial game released for the console too. Switch the penguin out for a caveman and exchange the ice for boulders, and you basically have the very same game. The idea here is to clear each level of the bad guys. The screen is made up of boulders arranged in a pattern, and you can instantly smash these to get them out of the way, and then push these blocks into the bad guys in order to squash them. When you push a block, it will keep moving in that direction until it either hits the side of the screen or another boulder. This means that you can shove them a whole screen's width if you like for some epic kills. Some of the blocks are plain black, and if you leave these too long they create another monster. Be aware though, because the baddies can also destroy the rocks in order to get to you, and if they touch you then you lose a life. You need to try and clear the levels quickly, because if they're able to break all the blocks, then you can't kill them and it's game over. Stone Age has attractive visuals, cheery music and some excellent gameplay too, even if it's not wholly original. A lot of early pinball games on home consoles failed to satisfy those who were used to the real thing. Whether it was because of dodgy unrealistic physics or strangely designed tables, see Video Pinball on the rival Atari 2600 for a good example of this, they more often than not failed in their attempts to recreate the thrills and spills of a real machine. Whilst not perfect, Astro Pinball does a pretty good job of doing that very thing. It's certainly much more faithful than what we've seen on rival systems of the time. It's also notable for trying to do some sort of 3D perspective, perhaps the earliest attempt to do so in a pinball game, certainly the first I can think of anyway. There are all the usual features here like ramps, bumpers, flippers, bonus multipliers and extra balls. Up to 4 players can compete against each other to get the high score, and the table is even themed, something you didn't really expect to see in a home pinball game of this age. The graphics in this one really are excellent, with the vibrant colours and expertly animated table. The sound is also up to the same standard with excellent effects and some nice snippets of music. The only real flaw with Astro Pinball is that it's far too easy to lose your ball due to the big gap between the flippers and the 2 wide tubes down either side too. But this is a pretty minor negative, as the fun factor will keep you playing Astro Pinball for a while to come. One of the last games released for the system by VTech, Chopper Rescue is probably the most impressive from a technical point of view. Using an isometric perspective, this title borrows heavily from the Sega arcade classic Zaxxon, in both looks and gameplay. In it you fly your chopper over an enemy city, trying to avoid the skyscrapers and birds whilst collecting the precious fuel and medical supplies. Then once out the city you have to fly to the remote islands and deliver the much needed crates to them. In this part you refuel by passing over the oil rigs and must watch out for ships and those pesky birds once again. In the final part of the game you have to rescue stranded people whilst keeping your fuel topped up and once again avoiding all the hazards. As well as the shadow under your copter, a handy bar on the right hand side of the screen can be used to judge your height. The top panel keeps you aware of your fuel level, lives, high score and current score. Although the influences are clear to see, there's more than enough original touches in Chopper Rescue to make it feel like a totally original game. The colour scheme is a bit garish and the scrolling is pretty jerky, but the visuals are otherwise pretty good. The sound effects are pretty standard, but do the job intended. Chopper Rescue is a game that shows the CreatiVision could have been a real contender. The name of this one will no doubt lead you to believing that it's yet another variation on the classic air-sea battle game, made famous on the Atari 2600, having previously appeared in the arcades, but cloned across numerous systems thereafter. In fact, it was even known under that very same name in other markets, no doubt to cash in on the Atari game's success, but I feel that this does it a disservice, as Air-Sea Attack is actually quite a different game. Although it does feature a similar gameplay style, the implementation of it is very original, as you guide your submarine through hazard-filled waters taking out the enemy. These foes come in the form of fighter jets and helicopters flying across the skies, as well as destroyers and gunships lurking amongst the waves. You take these enemies out with some very precise use of your periscope. A marked line appears above your sub down the centre of the screen, and you have to move across there along it in order to aim your missiles. Meanwhile, the boats drop depth charges to try and take you out, so you need to move your sub left or right to avoid them. The trick to this game comes in the timing of your shots, which have to be adjusted for both the speed and altitude of your targets. The graphics and sound aren't anything special here, but there's lots of colour and the control panel is a very nice touch. Air-Sea Attack is quite simple, but also highly playable. The CreatiVision clones continue with Auto Chase, which is definitely one of the most shameless of them all, being a blatant rip-off of Namco's popular Rally X arcade game. If you haven't played Rally X before, it's a top-down driving game where you steer your little racing car around a maze trying to collect the flags and avoid the opposition drivers. You have to try and do this without running out of fuel, and a handy map in the info panel shows you the location of all the flags and enemies. This fuel can also be burned to create clouds of smoke that stop enemies in their tracks for a short time. You obviously have to be careful how much you use so you have enough to finish the level. As the game goes on, the levels get larger and more complex, and the enemies become more aggressive on the chase. In Auto Chase, the plot has been adapted so you're now a burglar escaping the police, and instead of collecting flags you're swiping money bags. There are also a few other minor graphical changes too, but it's quite obviously the same game. Auto Chase looks great, the addition of scenery, which is something that Rally X didn't have, is really nice, and the multi-directional scrolling is very smooth. The audio is also very impressive with nice music and sound effects. Auto Chase might be just another clone for the CreatiVision, but it's also a very competent one that's a great deal of fun to play. One of the earliest games released for the CreatiVision was a blatant clone of the classic Williams arcade game Defender, known as Planet Defender, Galaxy Defender, or Earth Defense Force depending on your region. Just a year later they totally reskinned the game and made their plagiarism a lot less blatant, with the release of this title, Deep Sea Adventure. In fact, without playing the two side by side, you'd probably never even spot this. So the spaceship is now replaced with a little diver in a suit. The alien enemies are different types of fish and sea creatures, and the planet's surface has become a seabed. Otherwise, the gameplay is pretty much the same, as you scroll in both directions trying to kill the enemies, use the scanner to locate them, and attempt the high score. The one big difference in both VTech's original game and this reskin to Defender is that there are no humans that need rescuing, which admittedly removes the risk and reward element from the game. This also means that what's left is a fairly generic horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up, but it's certainly a pretty one, with some lovely colourful graphics and smooth scrolling. The sound effects aren't quite so great though, but there's some nice opening music. The controls are fast and responsive too, making Deep Sea Adventure a very playable, if a bit generic, shoot 'em up for the VTech console. Donkey Kong was not only one of the very first platform games ever released, but also the game that put Nintendo and their soon-to-be mascot Mario on the map. So with the huge success of that game came a multitude of clones and copies, including this one. Swap out the infamous ape for a burly prisoner and replace Mario with a cop, and you have Police Jump for the CreatiVision. The look of the game actually reminded me very much of Fix-It Felix Jr., the game featured in the excellent Wreck-It Ralph movie. Just like the fictitious coin-op in that film, Police Jump keeps on scrolling up to the top of the building, rather than having separate single screens. Did somebody at Disney own a CreatiVision as a kid? Who knows for sure, but what we do know is Police Jump is a rather spiffing take on the Nintendo arcade classic, and one that provides the player with some great platforming action too. In fact, it's the only game of this type on the console, so pretty much essential by default. The graphics are colourful and well animated throughout, and especially liked the way the criminal climbs the building. The sound effects also suit the game perfectly, and there's some very cheery little snippets of music positioned in at the right times. My only slight complaint is that the jumping is a little floaty, but you'll soon get used to it, and then the fun in Police Jump really gets going.
Smith, the electronic wizard in the electronic land of Oz.
We are the Dick Smiths, whiz kids, and we watch the wizard because...
Why?
Look, speak and spell. TV games, wow.
Soothing radios, walking stereos, electronic funway.
And kids, unreal handheld games.
Computers, walkie-talkies, experimenters' books.
The Dick Smith Wizards.
And because I import direct, I'm normally lots cheaper, so you'd be crazy to go anywhere else. And kids, remember, even if your mums and dads don't understand electronics, you can bring them with you! You mean I can be a Dick Smith whiz kid too? Dick Smith, the electronic wizard in the electronic land of Oz. And there's a store near you. Dick Smith!
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing exclusives for the VTech CreatiVision. Can you think of any other exclusives to the obscure 8-bit console that should have made the list? Or do you think some of these games were unworthy of inclusion? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comment section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons who continue to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular, their much appreciated pledges: Mitchell Valentino, Neptune, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Ozzy B, D Vaughan, DOS Gamerman and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to host for extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.